My name is Martin Shaw. I'm the Trust Officer for the London Baptist Property Board. I'm talking to you today about charity registration and CIOs. Looking around the room, I can identify at least one person who's already a registered charity. Is there anybody else who's already a registered charity in their church? Okay, why are you here?
Because I want to set up another charity.
Yeah. Okay, right. Well, we can talk about the difference between a registered charity and a CIO, but you know, if you're already there, then you know, in a way, a lot of what I'm about to say doesn't apply to you. But anyway, welcome. It's lovely to see you here, and I will be doing a questions and answer session at the end. If you want to, if something occurs to you during the presentation, ask at the point it's in your mind. We'll put it on the wall and I'll deal with all the questions at the end. Okay? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Excellent. Good. Okay then. We'll crack on just a little bit then. So, I'm Martin Shaw, Trust Officer of the London Baptist Property Board. We're 100% owned by the London Baptist Association. We are a different company to the London Baptist Association, but we're 100% owned by the association of which we're all members. We're holding property in trust for 320 churches in and around London. And one of the tasks of the property board in terms of its strategic objective to help churches is to assist them with regulation in general terms. So we're trying to help churches as they grapple with the increasing need for more and more regulation. And part of that is what we're talking about today, which is charity registration and CIOs. So, charity registration. Why are we talking about charity registration today? It's for this reason. All Baptist churches must register with the Charity Commission by March 2031, which means that, well, there's a smattering of registered charities already in here, but if you're not registered at the moment, you're not required to register as a charity because Baptist churches are accepted charities. If you're affiliated to the Baptist Union and your property is in trust with the recognised Baptist Trust Corporation, you do not need to register with the Charity Commission until March 2031. Now, Baptist churches being as they are, getting them to engage with this kind of agenda, even if it is like March 2031, that's 5 years away, Martin. I won't be a trustee in 5 years' time. It'll be somebody else's problem. Don't know if that's a healthy attitude to hold. So I want to try and encourage people to engage with this sooner rather than later. So for those of you that already are registered, then please tell people what I've been talking about today, because it's very important that people start on this journey now and grasp it amongst all the other activities that you're trying to do as churches. And I know that, you know, you've all got a missional agenda, you've all got things that you're trying to grapple with and problems that you've got within your own churches. And I'm sorry if this is adding to them, but we really do need to do something now. Because what will happen if we don't? 30th of March 2031, if you have not registered as a charity, you will stop being a charity. The exception that is available to you by your membership of the Baptist Union and having a property in trust with a trust corporation will finish. You will stop being a charity. What does that mean? Well, that means you will lose the benefits of charitable status. You will no longer be eligible for gift aid. Who can afford to lose 20% of their plate income from the collection? I know I can't. I know our church can't. Because the premises are no longer occupied by a charity, the buildings may become eligible for business rates. Whose church can afford to pay, even at the lower end of things, anything from £10,000 a year for business rates? You don't have to pay rates because you are currently a charity. Once you stop being a charity and you occupy those buildings, if the local authority gets wind of that, they will levy business rates on your premises. So either you're going to lose income or you're going to incur an additional cost, which will amount potentially to tens of thousands of pounds. So, you know, and then there are other protections that you enjoy under law by virtue of being a charity. This one I'm not quite so sure about, but potentially there could be certain protections in equality law that you will lose because you are no longer a charity. Incidentally, I should also add that if you are operating under model trusts, the trusts require that you operate as a charity. So you'll be, this is all like deep stuff, I know that. But once you start operating outside the terms of your trust, then you're triggering a whole other range of grief that I won't go into today. So it's problematic. This is going to, you know, manifest itself definitely in terms of loss of gift aid. Once you stop being a charity, you can't claim gift aid anymore, can you? You may have to pay business rates, and you may lose the protections that you enjoy at the moment under equality law. Is that serious enough for you to want to engage with this agenda? Or do you just want to walk out the room now and say, forget it, Martin, I'm, you know. No, you're responsible people. You want to engage with this, and, you know, I'm here to tell you what you can do about it. Because where do we go from here? You know, Martin has really raised a lot of concern, and I've got a very furrowed brow now. I'm happy to tell you we can help. So the question is, registered charity or CIO? So the requirement is by March 2031 that your church should be operating as a registered charity. Now, looking down the column on the left under registered charity, it's relatively straightforward to register as a charity. If you are using the Baptist Union approved governing document, the approved bit means that your constitution has been approved by the Charity Commission already. So there's no requirement to go anywhere else to get an approved charity constitution. It's already been approved by the Charity Commission. So you've already ticked a box there. And to make it even easier, you can register your charity online. And the advice there is you gather all your documents that you need to go into charity registration, which is name, address, date of birth, etc. for all of your trustees, your constitution and your last financial accounts.
Sorry, the new constitution, is that the latest one, which is in 2008? Or?
Something like that, yeah. So it's the latest Baptist Union approved governing document. All right. Yeah. So at the end of all of this, I'm going to give you a list of resources that, you know, will appear on the screen. But, you know, I'll put my pad round. If you write your names and an email address on, I'll circulate the slides and the links to all the presentation later on this week, okay? So, if you've got a approved governing document, constitution, then you can tick a box basically that gets you to first base with charity registration. Completing the online form, there's guidance that tells you what information you need, and it is an exercise and it might take, let's say, an hour or so for you to do it, but by working your way through it systematically, you record in each individual trustee's name and address, date of birth and so on. and then upload your accounts, within a few days you will be a registered charity. So as a registered charity, it's quite simple to do. One of the documents that you need to have is concerned with safeguarding. So one of the questions that will be raised is, do you work with children and vulnerable adults? And if you sort of indicate yes, then they will ask you to upload your policy for safeguarding as well. So it's handy that we've got Rachel in the room so she can make sure that you're kind of complying with all of that. So CIOs then, why would you be a CIO? Charitable Incorporated Organisation. Okay, so the key bit there is the incorporated. A registered charity, we are assuming, is going to be an unincorporated entity. Now, what's the difference between an incorporated entity and an unincorporated entity? There are two things, and it's not really very easy to explain, but a company is recognised in law as a separate individual legal personality. So in law, a company is a person in the eyes of the law, whereas an unincorporated entity is represented in law by its trustees. So the only way that an unincorporated church can bind itself into a contract is under the signature of its trustees. A company can enter into a contract on its own account. Of course, its own trustees will sign the documentation, but the contract is in the name of the company rather than the respective numbers of trustees. Do you understand what I'm saying there? Because it's really difficult to get your head round. Okay. Hello?
That means...
Will you put your question on the board, please?
No, it's a different one.
Okay.
So that means that the onus lies on the trustees with the unincorporated, if for anything.
Okay, we'll come to that. Because what we're talking about is the perception of commercial risk. That's fundamentally where your question's coming from, okay, I think. So, you know, at the moment, you as a church, you will have a variety of contracts for different things, and most of the time, they will be entered into by people that you have mandated from your trustees. So typically it's the secretary and the treasurer will sign your photocopying lease agreement on behalf of the church. Do you understand what I mean?
So sorry, am I right in saying that the treasurer doesn't have to be a member of the church? Is that correct?
No. Your treasurer must be a trustee of the church. Yeah. So you can delegate certain tasks to other people outside the church, but there must be a treasurer appointed within the church. Okay. The incorporated entity, CIO, company, whatever you want to call it, is capable of existing as a legal personality in its own right, whereas in the unincorporated entity, it can only exist in the legal personality of its trustees. So going to your point then, the question is, who is liable? And then the next question is, who is liable for what? What is the risk that you are so concerned about? So you might say, well, the church could be sued. Yes, it could be sued, but for what? What is the risk that you are concerned about being sued about? And the other thing is, don't you have insurance? So most of the time, churches carry public liability insurance. I've got to tell you, it's very important that you do. And you can also subscribe to what's called trustees insurance. So it used to be offered routinely, but I don't think it's any longer the case that Baptist Insurance offers trustee insurance. I think it's an added policy that you need to put in place, and I would encourage you to do that. So as you conduct yourselves as trustees using, reasonable skill and judgment, and putting in place suitable policies and procedures for the management of the church, if you do that in a responsible way, with insurance, then you've got all of the protection that you conceivably could need. And I'll tell you this, to date, there has not been a successful prosecution of a Baptist church trustee acting, in their capacity as a church trustee. Not one single successful prosecution. So when people have this debate about, I don't want them to come and take my house away. Well, what church would allow you to have to, or compel you to sell your house for the church's liabilities? The church ought to be realising its own assets for any liabilities that you are undertaking on behalf of the church first, surely. Okay? So, put in place correct policies and procedures, take out correct insurance, and the risk that you are concerned about is being managed through the application of policies, processes, and being covered by insurance, okay? And there's an awful lot of kind of resources and things like that available to you from Baptist Insurance. You go on their website, it's all free to look at, freely available. Anybody can go on there and address this question of risk. So why are so many churches attracted to going down the CIO route? So the rationale for that is the perception of commercial risk. And what do I mean by that? I mean, commercial risk is where the church is involved in an enterprise that is outside what you might term normal church activities. An example being a building development. Some churches are engaged in building developments, and for contracting purposes, it is much more straightforward for a contracting company to engage with another incorporated entity than a group of individual trustees. So in that situation, it's preferable for the contracting parties, if you like, to have comparable status as incorporated entities. The other aspect, because the church is involved in a property development, there is an increased risk to the church because of the nature of that activity. Somebody's mucking about with your building. If it doesn't work out, then you would want any risk associated with that activity to be ring-fenced within the CIO. So the
Is it possible then to set up a subsidiary to deal with those sorts of things instead of doing it through a company?
You could set it up as a separate subsidiary. The difficulty with it is maintaining the link between the property ownership and the actual contracting that's taking place. So if the church is a CIO, then there's a direct link between the beneficial ownership of the church and the CIO. If you create a separate entity to manage the development project, then you need to put in place leases and things like that. It does happen, but it puts in another step and another added cost as well. So the other thing is that if there is something within your church activities that is an unusual commercial risk, if, for the sake of argument, you are operating a trampoline club as part of your normal church activities, that is a higher than normal risk for church activities, and I would suggest there that you might want to consider mitigating that. Do you see what I mean? I'm going out for extreme examples here. That's the only real reason that you'd want to go into a CIO. So the message from the property board, I guess, is unless you're doing something particularly sporty or special, go down the registered charity route. It's relatively straightforward. Yes, it is a pain, but once you've done it, it's done. You can tick the box and you can move on with all the good stuff that you want to do. When you go down the CIO route, you need to adopt a new constitution. Now, you can map the approved governing document onto the CIO constitution, but you need a license to do that from Anthony Collins Solicitors. Let's just say, as you will see from the rest of what I've got to say, you will also need to transfer all of the contracts and undertakings and assets out of the existing unincorporated church and move them into this new legal entity, which is called a charitable incorporated organisation. So that requires a solicitor. Who could we possibly imagine who would want to do that? And they will charge you between £3,000 and £5,000 for doing that, depending on how complex your asset structure is, what form of constitution you want, and all that kind of good stuff. So it is much more involved, much more expensive, and the question you've got to say to yourself is, realistically, are there enough benefits in doing that, and can we afford to do it? Because that's quite a significant cost and exercise when you compare that with the registered charity route. Is everybody understanding what I'm saying here? So, essentially, that's it. There is a lot of talk around CIOs at the moment. I think we had 8 churches register as CIOs last year. Now, I'm not entirely convinced why some of them actually did it, because it seems to me they were relatively straightforward. But others are doing it because they've got complex property portfolios and things like that. So in actual fact, I can categorically state, if you are already a registered charity, you have done everything that is required by law. The deadline is for people who are not registered charities, and you must complete charity registration by March 2031. And really, I want people to start doing this now to get it out of the way, and then you can concentrate on other things. Now, there is a downside to being a registered charity. You will have to file your accounts each year with the Charity Commission. They will have to be presented in a particular format, and you will need to add to it a commentary, which you may not do already, explaining how it is that you provide a public benefit. So being a charity, you should already be mindful of your duties to provide a public benefit. Now, public benefit in terms of the charity law actually is relatively straightforward by the terms of what churches are already doing. If you've got a Sunday school, the law says you are providing a public benefit because you're giving instruction to you young people about the moral standards of life. So the law actually recognises the value of what churches are doing with Sunday schools and youth clubs and knitting groups and any other form of outreach is providing a public benefit. If all you do is an act of worship for your own members. So you do need to be mindful of public benefit when you are writing up your annual reports once you've registered as a charity.
Suppose you have a nursery that is not run by the church, it's run outside of the church.
That doesn't qualify as being a public benefit. So this is what the church does within its own activities. So things like anything that you do for outreach, youth clubs, kids clubs, Sunday schools, anything like that, even if it's just, a coffee and chat, where it can be argued that people are on their own perhaps, or you're just wanting to offer friendship, that is a public benefit. Okay, so make the most of things like that when you come to write these reports out. Okay? So, one of the difficulties we've had of existing in this world of being accepted charities is that, with the best will in the world, we've all got better things to be doing. And things like, well, justifying our charity status by offering a commentary every year in our annual accounts is the sort of thing that can get overlooked. So please get into the habit of doing it. And then you're ticking off another box with the Charity Commission, because every year the Charity Commission will argue in future from 2031, they will argue that we're giving you free money with gift aid. We're accepting your premises from business rates. How are you justifying that in the benefit that you provide to your community? That is the critical question they will ask. And if you say, oh no, we're just running a glorified God club here, we've got no interest in serving the public, they will say, well, that's fine, but we're not going to let you claim gift aid. Do you see? This is the kind of thinking that's going to be rolling down the line in future. So, the summary is, don't leave it. Famous quote, copyright by my wife. This is a message that is constantly ringing in my ears. But it's good for you as well. Okay. So, this was a funny thing that was just on the end of the slide deck that I used. So this is just a set of slides, but you know what? Embrace change, lead the future. The world is shifting. Those who adapt and innovate will be the ones who lead the way. Those who don't are left behind. So, you know, I thought, well, I'll leave it on there because actually it's quite apt, isn't it?